I know you've always wondered, why am I so exhausted? Why does everything that I need to do seem to take so much from me? And I am here today in this podcast to help make sense of your energy, your time, your space, and what's draining it, and how you can get back you. Welcome to The Messier the Better. Rebecca Mueller, licensed marriage and family therapist. Thank you so much for joining me here on YouTube today and just for giving me space and time in your day to kind of filter in little hints about ways that you can make this life, which by the way is messy. Life is messy. And if you haven't accepted that reality, let me encourage you to go there first. Life is messy, but we don't have to be. We don't have to feel messy inside. We don't have to live a messy life. And usually mess is chaotic and random and emotional and it's reactive. And I'm going to tell you that all of those things, the chaos and the reactivity and the emotionality of life drains us. And when we step back and we're able to step into our own selves and really just center ourselves, there's a part that I'm going to say is calm. The part of calm that comes within us doesn't mean that we're solving all the things on the outside, but it means that we're trusting ourselves to manage those things as we need to from the inside. That's the goal. The goal is not to make life beautiful or organized or clean or however you want to see the opposite of messy. The goal is to internally do the work so that when things do get messy, you're still good. And I don't mean I'm good, everything's good. We're not talking about minimizing. We're not talking about glossing over and making generalizations that says I can't look at the mess. I want you to look at the mess. But I want you to look at the mess with a quiet confidence that says, I can do this. I can do this. Because when we believe we can't do this, that's when the feelings of overwhelmingness come over us. And eventually that overwhelm does lead to more of a depressive state. And so let's hop in. I want you to think about yourself like a cell phone. I know that that's a obsolete analogy when it comes to 20, 30 years ago, before we all were walking around wondering what's our battery at. Now that we all have cell phones, it is a concern. And in order to make sure that my cell phone is charged, I have to make sure that I'm plugging it in and that the charger is working and that the outlet is working, and that I have a source of electricity so that my battery on my cell phone actually is filled. So let me say we do that for our cell phone every day, if not multiple times a day, depending on the life of the battery in the cell phone and how old the cell phone is. But we don't take that same time to do that for ourselves. And then we wonder why we run out of steam. It's not that difficult to put these analogies together and to think I am the same way. You are the same way. So the next analogy with a cell phone is that depending on what I use the cell phone for, it will actually drain my battery faster or slower. It'll still drain my battery. Everything does. But is it going to drain it faster or slower? Sometimes we let apps run in the background of our phones. We're not even using them and they're on and they're sending our locations out constantly. In the constant data sending, it's draining the battery whether we're using the app or not. And sometimes those background apps actually drain our battery more than what we're dealing with actually on the screen. So let me take that analogy further. We deal with things in the dailiness of our lives. That's the surface of the screen. And there are things in our days that go well, and there are things in our day that don't go well. There are things in our day that are stressful, drains the battery. There are things in our day that we can do for ourselves that kind of puts a little bit of energy back into that battery. However, we all have stories, experiences, trauma, past decisions, past events that run constantly in the background of our own lives. We're not just the daily, we are cumulative beings. We have been collecting information about life and living and surviving and thriving since the day we were born, and actually before that. But that information, if we are fighting against it or we're not accepting it or we're not dealing with it, those are like the apps that run in the background. And those are the ones that are draining you even more than what's happening in the dailiness. Let me give an example. If I grow up in a childhood home in which there's a lot of conflict, a lot of fighting, I watched my parents fight over and over and over and over again. And then I get to adulthood and I'm in a steady relationship, and that steady relationship happens to have natural, normal conflict. We all do. But when I get into that daily conflict, and not that you're having conflict daily, but in the dailiness of that surfacey cell phone analogy, I have a conflict with my partner. All of a sudden, that background app says, oh, hold on, we know how this goes. Because remember when you were 7 and your mom threw a plate across the kitchen? I remember when you were 9 when your dad threatened to leave. And do you remember when they screamed at one another? Names that you've never heard before? Do you remember how afraid you felt? Do you remember that you just wanted the conflict to be over with? And you were willing to do anything as the child to get that conflict over with, even step in between your parents. That information is your background app. That information, that experience, that series of experiences is the background app now to the current situation that you have conflict, again, natural and normal, with your current partner. So not only is it about the conflict, but now your nervous system is pinging all the way down here in these hidden apps, these hidden experiences, and it's pulling from these experiences because ultimately your nervous system wants you to survive. And this felt really dangerous to you as a child. And if it felt dangerous, I am now in fight or flight. Or if I'm not in fight or flight, now I'm in this fawn or freeze state. That's your deeper app. That's draining. And that actually creates more emotionality, more reactivity, more chaos in this current conflict than it would normally if you didn't have that app. And you just said, oh, we're in a disagreement. Happens all day, every day, at any time. I'm just going to stick it through. We're going to have a normal conversation. I'm going to understand you. I'm going to share about me. And we're going to come to some kind of resolve to this conflict. That's somebody who doesn't have an app that's running in the background. Before you say, well, I don't have an app running in the background. You do. You do. And maybe it's not about conflict. Maybe it's about anxiety and doing something that has a lot of fear. Maybe it's about putting yourself out there. Maybe it's about being afraid of being accepted. You have a background app because we didn't grow up in bubbles. We didn't grow up in perfect environments. And it doesn't make our parents bad. It doesn't make our home life bad from childhood. But what it does do is it allows us to understand ourselves more so here in the current if we look backwards and go, oh, I get why I do what I do. I get why that background app is draining me in the current because of what I experienced. And now, how can I understand myself and then actually rewrite my nervous system in this experience in the current? That's healing. That's healing. And so we're not here to bash parents. You may have the best of parents and still had holes in your childhood that impact you. We all do. We all do. So think about the app on the surface of your phone is draining because you're using it. It's current. But you also have a lot of different apps running in the background, sending information, constantly sending information. And if we don't look at what's going on here and kind of rewrite these apps in the current, we can't change the past, but we can understand and provide compassion and grace and understanding. And then hope and change and resilience and choice and advocate for ourselves in the current. That's where that deeper app goes away. So, like a cell phone, I'm going to plug it in every day. So, my question to you in this space of how do you give energy back to your battery, I'm going to tell you physically, number one, you need to do this for yourself. This is a actual biological, neurological need in your nervous system, in your brain, and in your body, your muscles, everything that's working. You need to recharge that battery. And we do that in the most basic of ways. Sleep, eating, drinking, taking care of our health, tending to our aches and pains, making sure that we're caring for and rehabilitating those things that aren't working for us. That's number one. Number two, I've got to look at my daily life and look at really what's draining me. We all know it. We all know it. It's like looking at an experience, say I go into Trader Joe's and I have an exchange where it was like really frustrating in an aisle. I was trying to get around a cart and I just go, ugh, I just got drained. Not totally, not completely. I just got a little frustrated, a little draining. Maybe that drained like say 1% of my battery. Clearly it's not a 5. It shouldn't be a 5 unless I've had a day and then maybe it's a 5. But all these little things do take from us. And in the dailiness, I've got to change the way that I see myself and my situation. So here's the second part of this. Not only am I taking care of myself physically, but I'm also really challenging the way I see reality. Number one way to drain your battery in your perception, seeing reality, is to not see reality. Okay, that's number one. Because your body knows that you're trying to fake it till you make it, and you're trying to lie to yourself. When we lie to ourselves, that is the number one way that we absolutely drain our battery. Number two, the next way that we drain our battery in the emotionality is when we give into this massive amount of emotional energy that we can have. We can get reactive. We can say like, knock it off, stop it. Can't believe that. Ugh. Can't believe she didn't move for me. All of that right there is so much energy being drained instead of, I'm just going to move my card around. Or excuse me. Thank you so much. Please don't. Can you be quiet, please? And if you have kids, maybe it's be quiet, please. When we start challenging the amount of energy that we're giving innocuous situations that really have no consequence on our dailiness. I don't care if some lady's blocking me in the aisle at Trader Joe's. It's a little frustrating, sure, but I can work around it. I'm not going to give it that much power over me. But when we start giving these small events power over us emotionally, that battery, it's drained and drained and drained and drained. And sometimes our belief system of why me, this always happens to me. I have the worst luck. Oh, not again. Why do I even think that this is going to go well? That belief system is also draining you. So that's number 3. It's not just my emotions and it's not just my body, but it's also my belief system. And if I believe that everything bad is going to happen to me, that is you are starting a battery with 50%. 50%. And you know, because I know, when you have a battery that doesn't hold full charge, it actually runs out faster than it ever did if it was at 100. And so in this space, your belief system about life and yourself has to be challenged. And we will get there in a further podcast. Has to be challenged, because if it's not challenged, you are constantly putting yourself in a deficit before you even put your feet on the floor. Physically take care of yourself. Emotionally watch the reactivity of your emotions in the moment, giving more power to situations that don't deserve that power. And number 3, watch your belief system and the belief system that you have about yourself in this life. And then let me set those aside. And I want to say that our battery is drained in 3 different ways. We've got time, I've got space, and I've just got plain old energy. Time, if I'm not watching what I'm giving my time to, I'm actually choosing to give away that battery. If I say yes to everything, everything is good options everywhere. And I say yes to everything, and I don't say no to anything, I am putting myself at a deficit. And actually, all the good things that I said yes to are actually going to drain me so much. I'm not going to be in that moment. I'm not going to enjoy it to the fullest extent. I have a lot of clients that I work with where they overschedule themselves, they overcommit. I had one client, which I thought was great. She said, I have the disease of helium hand. And I was like, what is this? And she was like, my hand just goes up and I just volunteer automatically before I even know what's happening. And I thought, I understand that. I get that. But when you say yes to everything and no to nothing, your yes is actually not a yes. It's a, well, this is what I do. I automatically do this. I don't even know what no means or says or doesn't even come out of my mouth, because then I feel selfish or I feel like I'm not being helpful to you, and I need to make sure that you know that I'm here for you. That's the fastest way to put yourself in a deficit. Time. Where's your time going? What are you spending your time doing? And how are you giving some time back to yourself so that you can recharge throughout the day? And when I say that, I am not talking about 15, 20 minutes, an hour and a half, 2 hours. To recharge ourselves, it takes 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. That's it. And we all have it. We all have that time available. That's number 1. Number 2 is your space. Your space is about not only your environment, but also that personal space that you're letting things invade. If you are feeling drained, that space, and you invite things into that space and you allow things into your space personally, those things will become problematic for you. You love your kids, but you're like, just go away. And I think you love your kids, but now you're telling them that they're problematic to you. And that's not confusing for them. Yes, it is. But because you're not protecting your space and saying, you know what, Mommy's going to go sit on her bed, I'm going to read a book for 10 minutes, I'll be back. Your kids will survive for 10 minutes. At least I'm pretty sure they will. And if not, let's train them so they will survive for 10 minutes. But in that personal space, and when you start creating space for yourself in your environment, you start organizing things the way you want it to, you start caring for your home, your room, your car, the things that are in your control, you are creating goodness in your space, and that space becomes relaxing to you. When I decorate my home or buy things for my home, I was told when I was newly single after my divorce, I had to rebuild a home. I left with very little. And when I started to discover who I was in that space, in this new space on my own without being in a marriage. I really didn't even know who I was. And I would go to home goods store, and I would just wander because I didn't even know what I liked. I had no idea. And I had a dear friend say to me, I want you when you walk in, if you feel drawn to something, trust being drawn to it. And if you like something, like really like it, and you're intrigued by it, and you're again drawn towards it, consider purchasing it. And I didn't have a lot of money at that time. And so I was really careful, and I practiced that even at garage sales. How was I discovering me? I was creating a space that was about me, and it was about what was important to me. And I didn't really care if my couches didn't match. And I really didn't care that that table had scratches in it, because there was a story. And then the story was me rebuilding my life and rebuilding it according to what I was drawn to. And that was one of the greatest self-discoveries I ever did. But if your space doesn't reflect you, and I mean that visually, I mean that auditorily, I mean that in smell, all the things. If your space doesn't reflect you, it's draining you. Find a space that is yours and all yours. It can be a corner of a bedroom. It can be a bathroom. It could be your car. But start moving into that space, because when we give away that space, that's when we start getting drained. And number 3 is that energy piece. What I give to is taking from. Even if what I'm giving to is great and I am choosing to give to that thing, it's still taking. Everything we do on the phone, whether surfacey or there's a deep app, everything we do, for good or not for good, is still taking from me. So if I choose to go have dinner with a friend, then I'm choosing not to stay home and have a quiet evening. It's taking from me. That was also giving to me, because I enjoy dinner with my friend. But I want you to think that everything I give to also does take. And again, this is the importance of learning the power of no. No or not right now. I would love to have dinner with you, just not this week. Can we put it on the calendar in a couple of weeks? I would love to do this. It's just not going to work out. Because when we are tapped in our energy and we don't protect our energy, we become reactionary, chaotic, emotional, and quite frankly, really hard to live with. And then we wonder why we are living in this chaos. It doesn't have to be chaotic. It doesn't have to be messy. When you start protecting your time, your space, and your energy, things begin to get a little more calm. Life is not calm. I am not here to tell you that your external situations are going to go away. In fact, they're not. They're not going anywhere. But as long as that situation is there, whether it's a year, 5 years, 20 years, 50 years, I still can give to myself in that space now, so that I am able to manage myself with that situation as much as I need to deal with that situation. I'm not making that situation go away, but I am changing the internal of me so that I'm able to handle that better. That is where the mess leads us to better. And when we get better, I promise you, you're going to look back and say, this is best. This is best. I trusted myself to create time, space, and energy. I trusted myself to take care of my body, to take care of my emotions, and to build a belief system that's actually going to carry me successfully into whatever I decide to put myself towards. That is when our life reflects who we truly are inside and our character comes out. I know this is large, large concepts, and you're thinking, this is so great. How on earth do I do this? How does it practically look? I want you to subscribe and make sure you like this video because there is more coming. This life is messy, but it's not have to. This life is messy. Again, not here to tell you anything differently. However, in the mess, we can be better and we can be best. Don't lose sight of that. And as you come up with all these excuses and all these reasons why you can't, I want you to set those aside and I want you to start writing things that you can and are already doing. That is what's going to create this best space. That's what's going to create more and more energy. So sit here, come back to this podcast, rewind it, listen to a little snippet, do some inventory. What's going on inside of you? That's where this is going to absolutely blow your mind. Subscribe, follow for more. I'm so happy to be here because life is messy, but you are not. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next time.